This is a podcast produced by Ashridge Business School. Strategy Execution. Adi Sharif is a chartered organisational psychologist who has spent 15 years working in private and public sector organisations. Adi is also an Ashridge consultant in the areas of leadership and strategy execution.
Execution is about making strategy happen. It's about linking the thinking of the senior team with the doing of the front line. Now that might sound simple, but think of the example of New Year's resolutions. Many of us make lofty resolutions, but few of us actually make it happen. Now if that happens at an individual level, imagine the mess when it's magnified into an organisation. What you get is a disjoint between the thinking of the senior team and the doing of the front line. That gap between intention and action is what's come to be called the execution gap. Execution has become a hot topic. There are many studies and numbers about. But we don't need to look at the numbers to become convinced, just need to look around. I first got involved in the area of execution through my work in leadership development. Senior managers would sit me down and ask me to design leadership programs for middle managers, saying that middle managers lack proactivity, a can-do attitude, or commitment, whatever. Now, what's the implication of that? If we're talking about 30 or 40 middle managers, could it be that the selection systems are so poor that the bottom 10% of the leadership population has got in? Alternatively, you could say it's a genetic issue. Something's got into the water that's eaten away at the leadership DNA in the organisation. Or do we blame the senior managers? If 30 or 40 middle managers aren't showing leadership, what does that say about the leadership of the senior managers? The truth of the matter, in my opinion, is that we all have leadership within us. What's needed is a management process that gives the stage and the spotlight for people to lead. And that's what execution is about. If you want the numbers, here are two interesting pieces of research. The global spend on leadership development is $4 billion. That's a lot of people getting a lot of leadership development. Compare that with separate research that shows that about 15% of people in an organisation have absolute clarity as to what the organisation is trying to achieve, its strategic goals. What does that leave? That leaves 85% of people who have leadership potential but who aren't sure of what it is they're trying to achieve, dangling at the end of an execution gap. We've talked about the execution gap and we've talked about how we know a gap exists. Let's now turn our attention to making execution happen. Here we are in a coffee bar. Imagine a scenario where I asked you to get me a cup of coffee. You come to the counter and it won't take you long to work out that you can't actually buy me a cup of coffee. Facing you is an array of coffees, different types, different flavours, hot and cold. You could second guess me, or you could come back and ask me, what is it that I actually want? What's the moral of that story? In organisations, delegation happens in a way, very often, where people's initiative is stifled. So the first principle of execution is the principle of alignment, where the strategy is simplified to the point that it can be communicated and people understand what is it that you really want. Also part of alignment is a communication process where the strategy is cascaded through the different levels so that people at every level understand what exactly they need to do from where they stand to deliver against the big picture. Once you have clarity over the strategic intent, you then need to hold people accountable for their specific goals. Two scenarios we often come across. One is micromanagement, where people are overly managed, and the other is abdication. Within execution, what we're looking to create is freedom within a box. People need freedom to get the best out of themselves, their motivation, their initiative. But there needs to be a box around that freedom, and that box is defined by the strategy. So at every level, people are showing initiative, but are showing initiative according to the purpose of the organisation. Finally, there's a third principle of execution, which is adaptability. There is a military cliche that the plan will go straight in the bin on first contact with the enemy. Things are bound to go wrong. Expectations are not going to be met, and opportunities may well arise that weren't seen at the time of formulating the strategy. The strategy is nothing but theory. So adaptability is about a communication process that continually checks in with how strategy is performing. And there are different communication forums. At a weekly level, for example, I might meet my line manager and we have a conversation about what's working and what's not working. That's an operational meeting. Every quarter, there might be a strategy review where the senior managers give their view as to performance against strategy, and me on the front line, I give my feedback as to what's going on from my end about what's working and what's not. And the general question is, what needs to change? So when you take these three principles, alignment, accountability and adaptability, what have you got? Well, first thing, it's not rocket science. It's those things that are often neglected in organisations. But what the three principles give you is an operating model for how business is to be done. When you have those three principles being acted on, people start to show initiative. But more importantly, for a senior management team, you have people all pulling on the same rope at the same time in the same direction, and the execution gap starts to be closed.
Adi Sharif works with Ashridge Education and Skills as part of the consultant team that supports colleges and training providers. For more information on strategy execution and other key topics, please visit www.ashridge.org.uk/AES. This podcast was produced by Ashridge Business School.